family. It's great to be with you today. Thank you so much for having me. It's really fun to be a part of this process. Even though I'm not technically a youth minister, it's nice to be included. I'm Alice Churnock, and I am a counselor here in Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm really just thrilled to be with you for a few minutes. And today we're going to talk about crisis management. I know that the world is a very broken place, as y'all well know. And so I think it's important, especially as we're working with teenagers and adolescents, that we have some idea of how to handle it when a crisis does hit. One of my very first earliest years in counseling here in Birmingham, there was a group of seniors in high school who went on a senior trip, and they went to Aruba, and one of the girls on that trip was abducted and killed. And so coming back, all of the other teenagers who were her friends became my clients. And so I had to learn very, very quickly how to handle a crisis, and I really wasn't prepared for it. That's just not something that I was super trained on. And so I think it's really important that we have some ideas, because whether it's a tornado or a natural disaster or, I don't know, a war, suicide, all of those things, we're really going to have to be dealing with them when we work with kids. So I want to point us to Psalm 34. And Psalm 34 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those who are crushed in spirit." And I really like that, and I want that to be our framework for our few minutes this morning. And I really want to highlight those two words that the Lord uses, that He's close and He rescues. And those are the two things that we're going to hone in on: how to be close to someone in the midst of crisis and how to rescue in the midst of crisis. So being close, I think it's really important that we talk about that, because when a crisis hits, it can be very, very difficult to want to be close to that situation. It's really uncomfortable. It is not familiar. And so many times we feel like, I don't want to bother them, I don't want to interfere, they don't want to talk to me, or if they did, they would come to me. And I think that that's very counter to what the Lord has called us to do, that actually we are called to follow in His footsteps and be close to those who are brokenhearted. I think it's great to see that can be a physical closeness, or it can be an emotional closeness. But when an initial crisis hits, most likely that's going to be a face-to-face, I'm going to be with you, I'm not leaving you kind of closeness, all right? And so in understanding that, we need to go into the difference between sympathy and empathy, all right? Sympathy is feeling the same way somebody feels because you have felt it too, because you've been through it too, okay? And so you've gone through that same experience. That's sympathy. Empathy, on the other hand, is understanding what somebody is going through simply because you're human, and that's it, all right? Because a lot of times we're going to have teenagers who come to us and they're going to say, you have no idea what I'm going through, you have no idea what I'm talking about, you've never experienced this, so don't even talk to me, all right? And we got to be ready to give an answer as to why anything that we say has any sort of credibility. And the reason it has credibility is because of empathy. That no, maybe my father hasn't committed suicide, but on the other hand, I know what it's like to lose someone that I love. I know what it's like to feel embarrassed or scared or humiliated or depressed. I know what that's like. Even though I haven't walked exactly in your shoes, I get what you're going through. So I think really helping them understand that we don't have to walk the exact same story to really be able to relate to each other. And that's what empathy is all about, all right? So why is it important to be close to someone in the midst of crisis, all right? The first reason that I would say is that it is a massive honor, y'all, for us to be invited into their world of crisis, all right? that says that this person trusts us so deeply that they are willing to let us in. And that is a huge honor. I think one of the most thrilling things about my job is that I get invited into the places in people's lives that most people don't get to know or get to go to. And that's the beauty of you being close to someone in the midst of a crisis, is that you do have that privilege to be with them and to show that empathy. But the second reason is because we have a huge influence on people when we are close to them, all right? I think that, and from my own experience, I'm sure for yours too, but I have learned that the Lord often uses a crisis to show us more of himself, to strengthen our faith and to deepen our faith. And if we are close to someone as they're going through a trauma, then we have that opportunity to help point them to the gospel. Because the reverse is also very true, that the world uses a crisis to make people doubt God or get angry with God. And so we are really up against a battle, a spiritual battle, when we have a crisis and we can be close to someone and help them walk through it. I think about Job. I think about his wife and his friends, and how they were so quick to say, curse God, just curse God and die. And the world is going to be saying that. And so you have to know that when a crisis hits, because of that, if we aren't close, then we are missing an opportunity to further the kingdom and to really plant growth in that child's life, all right? So we're going to be close to them. Now, being close is a calling. It is a real calling. However, it doesn't mean that we have to have all the answers, because there are not answers a lot of times. And so we have to be okay with saying, I don't know. I don't understand it either. I'm so sorry. I don't get it. All right? Because sometimes that's the truth. So I think it's really good, and it's I think well-meaning, but it's easy for us to slip into youth minister mode, or my dad was a preacher, so preacher kid mode, or whatever it is that we're taught, all right? And it's easy to just start spitting out Bible verses, all things work together for good, or the Lord is going to use this in your life, or, things like that, which are absolutely true. But in the midst of an acute crisis, those words are like whoosh. I mean, in one ear, out the other. Nobody's listening to that. And if anything, it actually has the adverse effect in that it throws up what we call a communication block. And it minimizes what the person is going through, because you have just conveyed, you're spitting out some kind of religiosity and you don't get it. So just stop talking to me, all right? C.S. Lewis, I'm going to botch it, so I'm not even going to go there, but C.S. Lewis has a really, really good quote in his book, A Grief Observed, about how, don't even talk to me if you haven't understood what I'm going through, don't even go there, all right? Don't start spitting these Bible verses at me. There's a time and a place for that. In the midst of an early crisis is not the time or the place, all right? So we don't have to have all the answers, and that's very, very encouraging, all right? But what being close does mean is listening, sitting, crying, praying, being, but whatever it is, it's being close, all right? It's sending a text 3 times a day that says, I'm thinking about you. No expectations for response. I'm just here. I remember you, and I know what you're going through. And that's what the Lord does for us. He remembers us. He remembers us in our hurt and in our pain and in our trials. And that's what we are called to do in being close to someone else, all right? But then he also rescues us. Now, obviously, we are not the Savior, and we are not going to rescue people the same way that our Lord is going to rescue them. But rescuing implies taking action, all right? And so the second part is, once we have been close to someone, then it's time to take action, all right? And that can be in several different ways. Now, it's important that we go through what are some warning signs. When a child has gone through a trauma and they're not handling it very well, it's really helpful for us to know what's normal and what's, okay, this is too much. This child really needs to get some extra help where we need to intervene, all right? So, extra, we really need to step in, is signs of depression, all right? Now, you know the commercials of like Zoloft where the little depression bubble hops around and he's like crying all the time, all right? That's not really how teenagers are going to show depression. They show it more through anger, agitation, irritability, those kind of things, like just a short fuse, right? That's going to be a typical teenager reaction to depression. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's just about every teenager out there, whether they're depressed or not, right? I know, I'm with you, all right? But I think we have to see, is this a difference in the personality? You know, if you had happy-go-lucky Jane and she was normally really chill, and all of a sudden she has a super short fuse and she's griping at everybody and really grumpy and scowling, that's a sign maybe she's not handling this very well and we need to step in, okay? Numbness, just that sense of I'm not here, I'm not feeling anything. I call it the blah feeling with my kids, you know, you're just kind of blah. Nothing good, nothing bad, just blah, all right? We're also looking for sleep problems. So if a child is telling you they're not sleeping at night, or they're sleeping too much, that's something to look for. Increased anxiety, even jumpiness, you know, if they scare easily, that's a really big deal, and that's something to watch out for too, okay? So know those warning signs, but the big question is, are they interfering with your daily life, all right? So is the person not able to go to school anymore? Or have their grades dropped tremendously? Those are things that are interfering with daily life. Now, they may be anxious, but still continuing on, and that's okay. We're going to keep rocking with them on that, all right? But if these emotions are interfering with daily life, we got to step in, all right? Quickly, we got to step in, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do, right in the midst of a crisis, all right, I want you to think back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all right? Do you remember that triangle of hierarchy of needs? And at the very, very bottom of the triangle, there's food, shelter, and safety, all right? Those are the three things. When a crisis hits, those are the first three things that we're worried about, and that's it, all right? We're going to be close, and we're going to provide food, shelter, safety, all right? Because when a trauma has hit, a person has lost a sense of control. So the best thing that we can do for a kid is help them feel like they have control over anything possible, okay? That can be, what do you want for lunch? Or what do you want to wear to the funeral? All right? Those are really small choices, but that helps a person regain little bits of control into their lives. So helping them just start with those basic needs. We'll get into the deep emotional stuff later, but right at first, they need to know, I'm going to be taken care of, and I'm okay, and I'm safe. My world and my situation around me is not safe, but I'm okay. I'm right here, all right? Now, the second thing I think is really helpful in rescuing is for us to have even just a basic understanding of the stages of grief. And I wish that we had more time today to really dive in to understanding these stages. But the Cliff Note version is that there are active stages and there are passive stages, okay? And active stages include anger at God, anger at everybody else, angry at the world, angry at my dog. It doesn't matter. There's going to be a whole lot of angry, all right? And that's normal. So knowing that that's an active stage. There's also active depression, and that's typically when they would act out like in that depressive state, okay? And so helping you see that there's a depressive version that's active, all right? And those are parts of that. Now, there's also the passive stages, and those include more of the immobilization. Like, I'm shocked, I'm stopped, I can't move, I can't make a decision, I'm just stuck, all right? That's part of grief. Then there's also the bargaining stage of, please don't let this happen. How can I fix this? I'll do anything. But then there's also passive depression. And this is when a kid, or an adult, but a kid especially, is going to go into, my life is not worth living. What is the meaning of this? What's the point in going on? I don't see a future anymore. Life will never be okay, all right? And I want to bring this up because it's really important that we pay attention to this passive depressive stage, because if a kid is going to commit suicide following a trauma, it is going to be most likely in this stage. So heads up, if you start having a kid who is asking those giant existential questions after going through some kind of trauma, that's a big warning sign that we need to get that kid some help, all right? So understand those stages of grief. Now, I think it's naive for us to think that those are linear, because they're not. It's cyclical, all right? And so they're going to cycle through anger, depression, back to anger, back to passive depression. So know that's really normal, and don't be freaked out if you see a kid who's going back through something that they've already gone through, okay? Now, the third thing we're going to do is try to provide some longer term care. So once the dust has settled a little bit, how do we help a kid to continue to process and work through that grief, all right? One of the best, easiest things for us to do is to just invite them to retell the story over and over again, okay? They are going to have different memories of the story or the event, that different things are going to come back up. And so our job as the youth minister is to say, hey, pretend like I don't know anything. Pretend like you've never told me this story again. Tell it to me again. All right? And let them have the opportunity to just continue to talk about exactly what happened and what they remember. Now, y'all, this is also really, really effective if you have an entire youth group that's been affected by something, all right? Get them together as a group and say, all right, what do you remember? Oh, I had forgotten that, and let them process all of this together. There's a lot of healing that can happen when we are not alone in our grief, and we know that somebody else is feeling the same way that we are too. All right, so help them retell that story. I liken it to a scary movie, and I tell kids this, that if you see a scary movie for the first time it's really scary, right? And you're like, like it's really super scary. Now, the second time you see that same scary movie, it's still pretty scary, but it's not quite as bad because you know the outcome, right? Now, by the 10th time you've seen that same scary movie, you're like, well, this is just dumb, right? This is stupid. I know exactly what's going to happen. Not scary anymore, all right? That's how trauma works. The more we're able to talk through it and retell that story, the less emotional impact it's going to have on us, okay? So help them tell that story over and over and over again. And while they're telling it, normalize for them that grief process, all right? That, hey, it's okay for you to be angry with God. Look at Jacob. He literally hardcore wrestled with God, right? It is okay. Our God is big enough to handle our anger and our confusion. And that's a lot of freedom to give a kid, all right? So normalize the stages that they're going through. But also know when it's time to refer, whether it's to a counselor or to a pediatrician, when it's time to bring parents involved. Those are times that are really important. I tell parents, and I tell you this too, if a situation is permanent, dangerous, immoral, or illegal, that's when you intervene, all right? Permanent, dangerous, immoral, or illegal, intervene. That's kind of the guideline, all right? So if you see a kid who's starting to go down a path that is illegal, drinking, or whatever that's not safe, that could be a permanent decision, that's a dangerous decision, that's a point where we need to bring some other people, whether it's parents or counselors or whoever else. We got to bring some other people involved, all right? Now, I'm going to close with this, but I think it's really important that we talk about it, all right? As a youth minister, or as somebody who takes care of kids, I'm going to speak to you directly. You've got to take care of yourself. This is hard work. And when you're in the midst of a crisis, secondary trauma is a very real thing. And so it's very important that you know that as you're walking through this, you're also going to be affected by what that person is going through, all right? And compassion fatigue is also a very real thing. And those have to be taken care of. So, y'all, I encourage you, if you're walking through a crisis with a child, have a counselor or a friend or a pastor or a mentor, have somebody else that you can talk through this with too, all right? You've got to take care of yourself. I encourage people to do what I call separation rituals, all right? I do this for myself every day after I get home from seeing clients, all right? The first thing I do is walk in the door, say hello to the kids, and go change clothes. That's my separation ritual. And just that motion of I'm getting out of these clothes and I'm into my mom clothes, all right? That's a separation ritual. For some people, it may be going and taking a walk or getting a cup of coffee or, do whatever you need to do, but make a designated point to separate yourself from dealing with the trauma to being a part of your life, all right? Because it's very easy for grief to overtake us too, because it's a very helpless feeling, all right? But I want to comfort you with this, that God gives us the grace to handle what He calls us to go through, all right? So whatever crisis that child is going through, God is going to give the grace for them to handle it. He has not given you the grace to handle their trauma. He will give you the grace to be the youth minister who walks beside that trauma, but you don't have the grace to handle what they are going through because that's their story, all right? And so you can trust that the Lord is going to provide for them exactly what they need, and He's going to provide for you exactly what you need. And our comfort goes back to that Psalm 34 verse, all right? That we worship a God who does all of this perfectly. He doesn't mess up. He never says the wrong thing. He truly promises us that He is close to the brokenhearted and that He rescues those who are crushed in spirit. there's comfort in that. Thank you so much for letting me come and be with y'all today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.